Okay, it's being recorded. You
Good.
can
Okay.
take it
Thanks,
away.
Kelly. So thanks everyone for coming today. You should have received in the email from Kelly a packet that had our agenda for today and a couple memos and materials that we're going to go over. So please let me know if you didn't receive anything. Speak up. Okay, sounds like everybody at least got their materials. So Kelly, should I just show my screen? That's probably the easiest too, because I don't expect everybody just ran out and printed the materials and started marking them up furiously. So if you're not caught up, we will keep you guys up to date. So here, I will present my screen. It says a window. That's good. Hold on, bear with me. There. Can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes? Okay. So this is the agenda that we sent out today. And I wanted to give a little bit of an update before we jump into new materials. So I want to do a bit of a recap on the CAC meeting that we had back in late August. Doesn't seem that long ago. But during that meeting, and let's see, will it let me jump? Did that change?
I saw things pop up, yeah.
Okay, does it look different now? I just want to make sure that
it does, yeah. It
okay, I want to make sure. Okay, so this is our agenda.
Your little notes came
Yep.
on.
All right.
Yep.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, so this is the agenda from that meeting. So I just wanted to give you guys a quick summary. During our past CAC meeting, we looked at Tech Memo 2, which is the project goals, objective, and evaluation criteria. And I heard some recommendations through our discussions about making some changes to the safety goals. You can see my notes over here about emergency services and some response time. And we talked a little bit about connectivity and the street design standards. So those updates were made to the goals. And then there was also some discussion and suggestions about adding a health goal related to livability, traffic volumes, traffic calming, those types of things. So we also made a change to that memo to add the health goal too, based on your guys' comments. So Tech Memo 2 has been updated. And then at the last CAC meeting, we also went over Tech Memo 4, which is the existing transportation conditions and the inventory. And then from that, we had some comments just based on the mapping that we were showing. So we made some updates to the bike and trail facilities. And then talking with Andy, we made some updates on the transit needs and what some of the planned improvements are from the transit master plan. And then we also had gone through the existing traffic performance and some of the connectivity needs. And so all of the recommendations for changes from our discussion have been incorporated into Tech Memo 4 too. So I just wanted you guys to know that everything I heard the last meeting has all been incorporated and we're all up to date on that. So any questions so far? Okay. I also wanted to give this group an update on the US 26 bypass feasibility reevaluation report. So we went through one more round of review, I would say with leadership at the city, and those were incorporated. And now that report has been finalized. And Kelly, I believe, is it on the city website or where did it end up?
So far, I was just asked to send it to the Planning Commission and City Council.
Okay.
And then there's some staff members that have also received it. I have not put it on the website yet. I'm kind of waiting on the go-ahead to roll it out.
Okay. Okay, that sounds good. So maybe in the next couple of weeks or when we get the thumbs up from them, it'll become a public document. Sound reasonable?
I mean, it just to be clear for the recording, it is a public document right now since I shared it by email.
Sure.
But so anybody could request it and I would send it to them, but we just haven't made like an announcement and shared it with the public yet.
Okay. Yeah. And that's what I meant. Kind of, yeah, formally introduced it to the greater public. Okay. And then I did also want to let this group know that if you don't know, the city's website does have some information on the TSP update that we're doing. But we also are starting to use the new Sandy Speaks website to introduce some information about the TSP. And probably, I don't know, 2-3 weeks ago, there was a new survey for public input on the transportation system that was sent out or posted live. I'm trying to think of the right way to say that. But it's been live for probably at least 3 weeks. And Kelly, you had said even as last week, we had over 300 responses from the public. I don't know if you know the exact number, but
Yeah, I'm looking right now. Yeah,
Oh,
we have 418 as of
Okay.
right this minute.
yeah. So to me, that's very successful. So if you haven't taken a look at it, just go to sandy-speaks.org. I have the address right here.
I don't think it's actually on there yet. Just so you know, we didn't launch Sandy Speaks yet, but it is. I think we're launching it this week, I believe. And then it would be a project on there, and that will be updated a lot more often and a lot more user friendly than our website. So right now, all it is, I believe, is a URL link that I've sent out to different people and then shared on Facebook.
Okay, sorry, I thought it was going through Sandy Speaks already. So there's
you're not incorrect in that was the intention. We just didn't launch it in time, and we wanted to get that survey out there. So
okay.
I don't think I told you about that.
No, it's fine. Okay, then we can't. Yeah, behind the curtain. I guess I just wanted to make sure this group knew that it was live and it was out there, that we're getting a ton of responses. And then if anybody in this group was either interested in it, if they didn't know about it, that we could share the link. And then if they wanted to tell all of their friends and neighbors about it and do a little advertising for us, they could do that as well. But it sounds like it's on Facebook.
Yeah, and it was also shared by the chamber, I believe, and also by the school district through Peach Jar. So I think we had a little over 200 responses, and then the chamber shared it and the school district shared it, and it pretty much doubled our response rate.
Wow. Okay, that's great. And then once that survey is over, this group will go back and take a look at all the responses and make sure that, any of their comments or suggestions get folded into our findings and recommendations as we move forward with the TSP update. Okay, so any comments from this group on any of those things? All right, guys are pretty quiet so far. All right, well, let's just jump in. So the first new item on our agenda was technical memo number 3, which is walking through the financial forecast that we've done. So hold on, let me switch over to that memo. Let me know when it pops up.
Yeah, we can see it. It's live.
Okay, thanks. Sorry, I can't see you guys when I talk at my screen. So
I know.
So good. So just a little bit of background. One of the important steps that we do when we're updating a city's transportation system plan is we need to know how much money we're going to be able to spend the next 20 years, which is the horizon year of the plan. So for Sandy, we've gone back and looked at the historic funding sources that have been helping pay for any sort of transportation system improvement over the last 10 years. So we've worked through all those. Mike's been really helpful helping us with those. But then we also have to look at what the money's been spent on as well. So it's both revenue and spending to see what's left. And honestly, I think the easiest way is just to just jump to this table that we have put together here. So first we looked at revenues. One of the ways the city receives, I guess, the majority of the money for transportation is through the State Highway Trust Fund. And that is getting your share of gas tax that's collected statewide, and it's distributed based on your population. So we are estimating that the city would continue to get about $720,000 a year. And if we inflate that through 2040, it's just over 18 million for that. So that's a pretty significant revenue source. And then another one is Sandy has a local gas tax. And you can see right here, annually, it's about just over $300,000. And if we extrapolate that out, we get just over $6 million over the next 20 years for that. And then there's also, if you don't know, Clackamas County has a new vehicle registration fee. So every vehicle in Clackamas County has to pay that. And that's also distributed based on populations to the cities that are in Clackamas County. And it's estimated that Sandy would get about $200,000 a year. And that comes out to be about just over $4 million in the next 20 years for that. And then City of Sandy collects system development charges with all new developments based on the number of trips that they would be adding to the system. And based on what they've been collecting in the past, we're thinking it's going to be around that $445,000 per year. Again, with some caveats of assuming, growth is relatively consistent over the years. There will be up years and down years. But over the next 20 years, we're estimating just over $9 million a year for that. The city also collects money on various transportation grants, either from the state or federal. In the past, we have $40,000 a year here. However, we did want to make some assumptions for that. There's actually a lot of grant opportunities for transportation. So we were hoping and estimating that over the next 20 years, the city could win 2 grants at $300,000 each. I mean, again, it's an estimate, but it's not unreasonable that the city would be able to do that. And then I won't bore you with all these little ones, but they get revenue off of interest. There's some other just miscellaneous items that come in, little things like the sale of capital assets. So if we total up all the revenues, we're looking at this, we're estimating the city would collect just over $42 million the next 20 years, which seems like a lot until you get into expenditures.
Rhea, before you move to expenditures, Mike
Sure.
had his hand up.
Oh, yeah, sorry, I can't.
Yeah, I just had a question. So the state highway trust fund, those were just straight lined out with a little bit for inflation. But do you think that's realistic with the state gas tax? That seems to be a declining revenue source with more efficient vehicles, electric vehicles. So, I would say that would either be flat with no inflation factor or declining, a little bit over 20 years. I mean, I know there's been some research into how reliable fuel taxes are and how, nobody has a crystal ball. So that was just, comment I had.
Sure. No, it's a great comment, Mike. But I would say, there's 4% inflation on all of these just to get them out to future years, so but the state is looking at, slowly maybe changing how they collect that money, because you're right. The use of gas is likely to go down, but they have some other pilot projects where maybe you just, pay per mileage that is on your car, that doesn't have anything to do with the type of fuel that we use. I would say the state will find a way to collect that money and it wouldn't dip down. I don't know, Seth, if you can. Oh, Seth said he can't talk. But I guess to be somewhat conservative, I think putting the 18 million in here is a safe bet, because I would guess that the state will find a way to continue to fund transportation. Any other comments on revenue? No? Okay. So jumping into expenditures, I won't go over all of them, but you can see there's a lot of things that the city has to spend money on for transportation. And with all of these, it comes out to just over 1.5 million a year on average. And if we extrapolate that out to 2040, it's almost $32 million. So with all of that, we are forecasting that we'll have just over $10 million to spend on the transportation projects that come out of the TSP.
Can you tell me why we have debt service? That's like the biggest item practically on that list, and I don't see any loans. What are our loans that we're paying off with that?
So I can't tell you the details because I'm just reporting information that the city gave us, but I bet Mike can. Most of this information came from Mike.
Yeah, Carl, that is the debt service for the Bell Street 362nd project, 20-year term, $370,000 a year. And we have about another $80,000 a year for the LED streetlight conversion project. And that's also a 20-year term. So that's a big chunk of money. But we're funding an important transportation project with debt, and that may be something we have to do more in the future.
Is that, Mike, is that 9.3 million consistent with what was just on the agenda for the council last night, or does that number need to be revised?
Well, no, there's two projects in there. There's the LED streetlight conversion, which is about $80,000 a year in debt service, and the Bell 362, which is about 370,000 a year in debt service. Now, there's nothing to say that, a lot of times on these bond issues, you could pay them off early, or you don't take them all the way out to the end of the term, or you end up refinancing. But these are pretty attractive rate on both of these issues. So I don't know if we'd pick up any savings by refinancing them or paying that debt off early. But no, I assume that's the same formula that you're using, Ria, to just straight line that 450K out,
Yep.
but over 20 years. Yeah.
Yep. Yep. And again, I will say, I mean, there's tons of caveats with these numbers, right? We're using lots of averages. It's lots of what's just happened the past, 5 or 6 years in the city, and assuming things don't, change too much one way or another. I mean, that's one of the reasons it's really good for a city to update their TSP every 5 or 10 years, just so you can realign the financial piece that we're going through right now. But I would also say it's just a forecast. We'll be using this $10 million just so we can be reasonable on what we think can be, constructed in the next 20 years. But if less money comes, then, the city just ends up building less. And if more money comes, as we get further in this meeting, you'll see, I mean, we have a whole list of things that we would like to fix. This just helps us kind of draw a line and, this is the $10 million. These are our high priority projects. This is what we're going to spend the money on. And then if you guys get a windfall with an extra 5 or 10 million, we'll just start working on the medium projects and we'll just keep moving ahead. It's really just kind of helps us focus on what's reasonable and what's not with the public. So when they see, $100 million project list, they don't feel like they're going to get all of those. We want to make sure we're being very realistic with what we can do. So does that make sense to everybody? Yeah. Maybe I'll stop sharing for a second. I can't see everybody when I talk. Okay, so if there's, thumbs up or head nodding, I can't see. Okay, thanks, Andy. So any other questions about the financial piece or what we're doing with that or anything before I move on?
I did have one question for the group. Is once we adopt the TSP, what's that memo has a lot of financial strategies for different grants and stuff the city could apply for. What's a typical process for most cities to start moving through all those grant options? Do most cities hire somebody to apply for all those grants and try to relate them to the projects? Because it would just be a very big undertaking, I think, for the city currently with our structure.
Yeah, I've seen a lot of jurisdictions do it differently. I mean, bigger agencies, have a pretty robust staff. They can dedicate someone to go through with that. But most smaller, cities like Sandy kind of just wait for opportunities to come to them. Like the TGM grant cycle just went through. When the STIP cycle comes around, you can go to the ACT meetings and maybe try to raise your hand. I know you guys have not had success in the past with that. But just kind of keeping your eyes out for what's out there and then following the various opportunities. But mostly, for small city staff write them themselves. Or you can hire a consultant to help you. I've written lots of grant applications for agencies. I'm sure Emma and Darcy have as well. Oh, Karen, raise your hand. Go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, I just thought I'd jump in. From Clackamas County, we do try to keep track of the different grants and we apply for them internally. I would think, and maybe I'm going to call out Seth a little bit here, but being able to work in partnership with those that at ODOT, because ODOT does have a variety of funding streams, and their programs change, every 4 years or so. So trying to match that right project to the different funding source. And I guess also, kind of coming up any sort of even larger federal grants that are out there, just kind of being aware of them, and then seeing if there are, partners in helping to apply.
Oh, it's Great advice. Mike, you raised your hand.
Yeah, I was just going to say, there's, I mean, what was it? Yesterday they signed the infrastructure bill.
Yeah.
So I think there's hope, but I mean, we can't put that in a financial forecast. But there is some money going to be freed up for infrastructure projects, and that's true. Playing the STIP game and the ACT game takes a lot of staff time, and it's and then we finally did get some STIP money. Took 11 years to get a project from concept to bid, and it ended up costing like 3 times as much. So, I think the city has kind of a bad taste in its mouth from the STIP process. But also, so those revenue forecasts, does that include our, FAU, SDBG, the block grant, the block grants money as well?
Yeah,
I think they include that.
does.
Okay. So, that will grow as the city grows. That's based on population. And same way with the fuel tax, distribution that grows. And the state fuel tax, the vehicle registration fee, and the surface transportation block grant allocations, those all grow with population. They don't grow as fast as the cost escalation on projects do, but they do grow with population.
Yeah, and your system development charges can grow too. I mean, depending if you have an up year or down year, you guys are seeing a lot of development. So, all right, Carl raised his hand.
Yeah, this has been an issue for me since I've been on city council, and except for Andy, who's just done spectacular with getting all of our transit grants. Don't ever retire, Andy. You're stuck there forever. We've always been a little bit behind the times or not being able to get any of these grants. Part of it's because we don't belong to Metro. That was a decision we made quite a while ago for a whole bunch of great reasons. But what we've had to do now lately is, or for quite a while, is to whatever's left over that isn't part of the Metro grant process. And that's been really a struggle. I don't know, one of those things we probably should talk about, how we go after our grants that are not part of Metro, but something as a small community we can get. But it is a big issue for us. Like I said, except for the transit arena grant applications, especially with roads and that kind of stuff, has been pretty minimal.
Yeah, and I would say, just because I follow a lot of this for a lot of cities over Oregon, funding really is going towards pedestrian, bicycle trails, and transit. That's what we're seeing kind of a pivot to, and safety, and things that support the state's, I would say, climate initiatives. It's becoming harder and harder to find grant money for just a pure motor vehicle, operational type of project. That's just not how our statewide goals are going. So in the ped bike transit realm, and safety, there is a lot of money coming. And I think a lot of the infrastructure bill, as it finally trickles down through the state and to grant opportunities or just funding that's given out, I think you're going to see a lot of that. But you also have a TSP that is full of a lot of pedestrian, bicycle trail, and transit and safety needs. So I would see a lot of those becoming more and more funded, and the motor vehicle piece maybe not as much. Just my 2 cents. But and then let's see, Seth did text in that so Seth checked in with Salem to help us with some of the ODOT money, like the state money that would be coming in. So that should be reflective on what their latest projections are. So yeah, Seth gave me that money, or gave me that number. So anything else we want to talk about money wise? No.
You can always have more of it.
Well, yeah, and I did not finish going through the memo. Give me a second here. After we go through this piece, the end of the memo goes through just some additional funding opportunities that the city can take a look at, which I think goes to the question that Kelly had asked for. Some cities do collect a transportation utility fee. It comes on like your water bill or your sewer bill. And it's usually like, $1 per month per certain building size. It ends up being pretty low cost for like a single family home would be like $5 a month, maybe 10. But it can get pretty expensive for larger users like a grocery store or maybe a large employer. But Mike and you had pointed out a lot of cities that do have a transportation utility fee don't have a local gas tax. So it does seem like smaller communities in Oregon kind of pick one or the other to get some additional transportation funding. But that doesn't mean you couldn't have both. And then also this talks a little bit about, you could also increase the local fuel tax. I know that's been turned, it hasn't passed the last time at least. Yeah, back in 2016, it didn't pass, but that's always something, that's an option too, depending politically how things are going. And then there's just a couple others. Like you guys already have urban renewal in your downtown area. And then there's some like debt financing, some other things you can do. And then there's a summary here of just some funding sources from the state, some grants that are available that the city can, review and look over in the future. But Karen, I do appreciate your comment about it. You kind of have to find the right partner at ODOT to kind of help you and figure out how do you match the right project that's in the TSP with the right grant or program, and make sure that you can get those things aligned. Right? Karen, raise your hand.
I did have a question because you did bring up urban renewal, and I didn't know if any of the urban renewal funds were used for transportation. It's not in the list of revenues, and that's a source that we at the county use for transportation projects.
Oh, Carl?
Yeah, I can respond to some of that. Our urban renewal funds are pretty much spoken for. In fact, we've got several projects that we're probably going to spend every penny we can possibly get once we get past the planning for it. But they're pretty well looked at from a whole bunch of different project viewpoints. So it's a little difficult to go after those with all the other priorities. Now, doesn't mean we couldn't change that priority around. The Urban Renewal Board has been looking at how we spend that money. But for the moment, we have some larger projects that we're probably going to spend a lot of money out of that.
Yeah, and they're non-transportation projects, right, Carl?
One of the big ones is, but we've got some others. 362nd Road extension, that's got some urban renewal money in it, which is a transportation project.
I do believe there's some like bike ped stuff associated with our Pleasant Street master plan that's going to get up and running again. That would come out of urban renewal, but probably, like Carl says, not huge projects, just kind of small infills and stuff.
Okay. Well, when we do get to the priority project list, if they end up being the same projects, yeah, we'll make sure it's clear that urban renewal is the funding source on those. Okay. Anything else on future financing? That kind of stuff? No? Okay. I want to just keep us moving. So the second thing that I had on the agenda today, and again, I'm going to share my screen, bear with me, is their future needs memo. All right. That work? So yeah, Tech Memo 5 is the future needs analysis. So we are taking a look at the existing condition needs and the future needs and really assembling all together. So we know what is going to be needed in the next 20 years. So I'll just walk through this a little bit with you guys. So here's a summary of the study intersections that we're focused on for the TSP update. These are consistent with the intersections that are in the current TSP, except for we did add US 26 at Vista Loop, both west and east on the east side of the city. So we added in those. And this is just a little bit of background. And I will say we're borrowing very heavily from the bypass study that we had worked on, because to do all of that work, we had to do year 2040, like motor vehicle performance and operations analysis at the study intersections. And the TSP is based on that same work for consistency. So we're using the same 2040 future volumes from that work. We're using the same network improvements for some different scenarios that we're looking at. The city has quite a few improvements that we felt were reasonably advanced enough or funded that we assumed they would be done in the year 2040. So they're just assumed in our baseline condition. And then with that, we find there's actually several intersections in the city that we're estimating won't be meeting performance standards in the year 2040. So it's US 26 at Orient, US 26 at 362nd Drive, then US 26 at Industrial Way, 362nd Industrial Way North, 362nd Industrial Way South, and then 26 at Reuben, 26 at Bluff, and then 211 at Bornstein. And maybe there's no surprises with those, but all of those we know without additional improvements beyond what's already been planned and reasonably funded are not going to meet standards. And those are the intersections that we would focus on to come up with some new capacity projects, if reasonable, to get them up to standard. And then here's just a big table that shows all the analysis and findings. So all of these intersections that have like something bolded shows the performance of the intersection and where it's not meeting the performance standard. And then we go through, and again, consistent with what we looked at for the bypass, we started adding some more improvements, and these are consistent with the improvement packages that we looked back at the previous TSP update about 10 years ago or so. So there was a alternative one is a package of local system enhancements in connections, mostly connectors, some collectors being built and making sure there's some better connectivity. And then alternative 3 that we looked at was all of alternative 1 plus adding the bypass project. And here's just a little map that shows some of those future street connections that we're talking about. So the purple projects are the ones that are in our baseline condition, the ones that we think they're either planned or have reasonable funding in the short term. And then those kind of pinkish, or I call that raspberry color, are all the ones in alternative 1s. Those would be those local system improvements, either little collector connections or extensions, a couple spot improvements, add some steady intersections. And then alternative 3 is the bypass. All right, hold on, so I'll pause there. I can hear a hand being raised. Seth, oh, hey Seth, how are you?
Sorry about that. I
It's
had
okay.
to borrow my wife's computer for a minute and couldn't figure it out. But anyway, one thing that Avi brought up with the baseline projects, we include the DeBarco extension to the highway. And I was just curious what the city's feeling was about that at this point in terms of the assumptions that it will be constructed without additional funds.
I think that's yet to be determined. So the don't want to go into this too much either because Mr. Exner will be on the decision-making body here shortly. But an applicant proposed a subdivision on that property without DeBarco Road extending through. The Planning Commission, this is all public record. So the Planning Commission just made a decision last week to deny that application. I'm actively writing the final order for that, and then we'll be issuing that. And the applicants already told us they will be appealing that decision to council. So council will be likely hearing that on December 20th. So on December 21st, I'll probably have a better answer for you, but I still might not have an answer for you because it could still go to LUBA or something else like that. So I don't have any really more information than what I've given you in the past. We have, at this point, we don't know is the answer.
Okay. So I guess I just, I don't know how big of an impact it makes. I don't know if DKS could turn it on or off and see if that totally changes everything, or is it still the same set of projects and it just, I mean, I guess it would just influence the funding more than anything.
Go ahead, Mike.
I think it's worth leaving in there. I mean, it's in our TSP. That's the crux of the argument for the land use application. And, it's not that the burden for constructing it was entirely on the developer. It was eligible for STC credits had it been, if it were to be constructed by a development, this one or any other. But I think that what has scared it off is the associated Highway 26 improvements, with a new street connection to Highway 26 and the grant of access process. Those expenses probably equal, if not exceed, the cost of extending the street from where it is now, 226.
Yeah, so I think, I mean, it'll stay in there regardless, but come January, before you finalize and adopt the TSP, we'll have to decide whether that's one of the projects on your priority list that you're going to fund, or it's something you can assume it's going to be built some other way.
I think it's safe to assume that there will be a street from the existing terminus of DeBarco that connects out to the highway one way or the other, but whether it will be consistent with what's shown in the existing TSP, that's what is yet to be determined. So I think there will be a project that connects that area of DeBarco Road and Langen Sand out to the highway, but it might not follow the conceptual layout in the TSP. We don't know that yet, and it could be half a year if it was to go to a LUBA appeal before we would know the answer to that, if not even longer potentially.
Yeah, and one thing we may have to do in the TSP process is include the ODOT improvements at the intersection, the decel and accel lanes, the center turn lane, the tapers, the whole bit. Throw that in there too and start collecting SDCs for it. Because I think the developer of that site would pay for the thing if it was SDC creditable, but only the City Street extension was SDC creditable. None of the ODOT intersection improvements were, and so that just, that was, at least that's the argument I think they made, was that it made it financially infeasible. So, maybe that's what we need to do. Look at that, include that in the scope of the project. Right now, it's just running a road from where it ends to the highway. It doesn't include anything at the intersection. Maybe we just need to, scope that so there's a little more. Those improvements are part of the project too. It'll, like Seth said, it'll either get built with SDC credits or without SDC credits, so.
While we're on DeBarco, I did want to point out one other thing. The other side of DeBarco, I think I might have made a comment back to this, but I just wanted it for the record here, is that I don't think that should be included in the no-build analysis. I don't think there's any project that's funded or even planned to connect the west end of DeBarco up to Champion Way at this time.
Yeah, I saw that in your comments, Kelly. I guess I left it as now just because we established that when we figured out what was going to go in the no build for the bypass. So I'll have to go back and look and see where that came from. Carl raised his hand.
Yeah, Kelly, didn't we have it extended with the west end up through to the I think it's Champion, where the new development is there. Didn't we have a road that went through that property and connected into the end? I think it's where the old or the current sandy yards are. Don't we have a plan for that?
I mean, I think it's shown in the existing TSP, and we do have some of the right-of-way on the south end of Champion. But I guess my point was that if we want to put it in the first phase or whatever you call that for spending money, that would be fine. But I don't think it should be in the no build because we can't assume that it's going to be constructed unless Mike disagrees with that.
It's not in the capital plan, and we're not collecting
Right,
SDCs for it. So we have to adjust both our capital plan and our SDC methodology to include it. But there's also some fat transit money floating around, and that sure would make things easier for SAM operations if there was a way to get from the
True.
Transit Operations Center to 362nd. So there you go. There's one of those magic multimodal projects that makes everybody happy and has a transit component to it.
Yeah, that was actually going to be my comment about the grants. I mean, I have a lot to say about going out and getting grants and what that takes from your staff the following years, and therefore what to include in those grants. But we should go into these projects in partnerships with that in mind, those bike ped / transit projects.
Okay, well, with that said, Kelly, yeah, I'll make sure that we take that off so it's not in the baseline, but it gets moved to the, right, that those local improvements, and it won't make any difference on our modeling. It's not like thousands of cars a day weren't using that connection and now shifting over somewhere else. It's mostly a map edit.
Yeah, and I just want to be clear that I think it would be a great project. It's just I don't think it
sure.
should be included in the no build at this time.
Yeah,
that was my only point.
Yeah, no, good comment. I mean, the no build should be no build, or things that are going to be built like tomorrow, which is why we're assuming like 362nd in the Bell, because we know those are happening now, right? So yeah, agreed. Okay, anything else? No, okay. I'll go back to showing my screen and walking through the memo. Let's see. So there's that map. Yeah, so we were talking about, DeBarco this end, and then DeBarco on this end, the little purple, and then the purple down here on the west side too. And then we looked at some other strategies for a motor vehicle that can be important in the TSP2. This is a summary table of traffic calming measurements and the different types of devices that can be applied, and then what some of the safety benefits could be from them. It's nice to have this for the city whenever they want to start talking about traffic calming needs, like with neighborhoods. And we'll also use this if there's any apparent locations where we think traffic calming should rise to be a project in the TSP. That doesn't always happen, but it's good to have this as a strategy in case we need it for a specific need. And then we also talk a little bit about adaptive signal systems, which is different than just having, a traffic signal with the set signal timing plan. Maybe there's like a morning and afternoon and an evening one. Adaptive actually changes. So it's collecting data on the volume and the demand on the system, and then it updates the signal timing like instantly. So it is adapting, that's the name, and in working for that. So this can be a very effective, especially with some of the congestion and delay issues that we even see today on US 26. And then the city currently has a project to put an adaptive signal system in the downtown area. And we had identified that there's a need possibly to expand it all the way out from Bluff to Orient, both based on all of the study intersections that I showed you earlier that have really high delays. And also our safety analysis showed there's a lot of rear ends at those signals that come from some of that congestion, and an adaptive signal system can help with that a lot too. And then hold on, I'm going to stop sharing because I hear hands raised. Carl?
Yeah, where does the lighted pedestrian crossings come in terms of different signaling and traffic slowing and that kind of thing? Is that part of this, or is that another segment that you can talk about for those things? So I am concerned that there's a number of places we could be placing those on Highway 26 and maybe even around the school district.
Oh, so you mean like protected or like flashing beacons for pedestrian
Right,
crossing?
right. I'm not sure exactly what your terminology is, but
Sure.
those flashing things, you push buttons and people can
Yeah. So, we will get to that. This is more the traffic signals, just knowing like, oh, there's a lot more side street demand. So it kind of changes how the green time is given to each of the vehicle approaches and changes based on that. No, the pedestrian crossings is a completely different thing.
Okay, right.
But we will get to that. But anything else on just the adaptive? I guess, and Kelly and Mike, make sure I said that right. So downtown through the couplet is funded, and that's what we're planning on right now. Oh, you're muted, Mike.
Yeah, Bluff to Ten Eyck / Wolf.
Okay, yeah.
The controllers are in, the radar detection is in, and now it's the algorithm is learning how the humans drive and cooking up a solution for that.
The robots are working. Okay, good. Yeah. So what we're proposing is that there is also a need to extend it to the west, really all the way out to Orient, if feasible, just because we're still seeing a lot of, there's a lot of fluctuation with the traffic, as you guys know more than anybody. Recreation use, seasonal, time of day, it's a sunny day, all of a sudden everyone's going to Mount Hood. It's really hard to have timing ready to prepare for those. So an adaptive signal can make a huge difference in getting traffic flowing. And like I said, and also a safety benefit, just because we are seeing a lot of rear ends during congested time. So we were going to have that as a project in the TSP. That would be something new.
Wasn't there a lot of accidents identified at the intersection of Reuben Lane and Highway 26? Wasn't that one of the main intersections?
Yeah, Reuben and really Orient and even Industrial Way. Yeah, those were all pretty high. It's all the signals on the west end have a lot of rear ends. Yeah. Yeah, those are targeted through the safety part.
I know we've made the change recently from Champion into Highway 26 from a speed up to a stop. Is that been monitored as a problem? Or is continuing to be a problem? Because when I come through there, I'm always trying to figure out how to squeeze in between the traffic. And I'm not sure that it's been an advantage for me to stop versus go in and try to merge.
Yeah, I honestly, I don't know. I'd have to look into it and see. I don't think we've seen a lot of collisions at Champion. So you mean coming eastbound?
Going eastbound, correct.
Yeah, and turning right in by the gas station.
Right, the Forest Service and the gas station.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't think that hasn't been the issue. No, not the eastbound right in.
Okay.
That I recall.
I don't remember seeing that identified on the accident reports we were looking at.
Yeah.
I think it was mostly all the traffic signals.
And I think Reuben was honestly double anywhere else, at least on rear end collisions. And then, yeah, all of them had issues.
Yeah. Well, and Reuben also stands out. I think that's the place where there were all the pedestrian.
It is. So it had the pedestrian fatalities and accidents and also all the rear end collision, a lot of the rear end collisions.
Yeah, I believe Reuben has got the same problem with that no sidewalk on the south end of the Highway 26 as an issue too. You have that kind of stuff. People trying to walk along there with a narrow little bike path, especially at night with the rain.
I jog along there sometimes. Yeah, it's not smart. It's dangerous.
Wasn't the fatality at the university or was it down at Reuben?
There was both. Yeah,
Oh.
University was one also.
Okay.
Yeah, they were both crossings. Those had vehicle collisions, but you're right, Carl. This no sidewalk on the south side makes people make unwise crossing decisions, and that's where those conflicts occur.
Yeah, I'm disappointed that ODOT didn't help us with a sidewalk in there when they redid that whole hillside. Anyway.
That's a great project you just identified. Probably a very expensive one, but yeah, a great project.
Okay, I'm going to keep us moving. So it's almost 2:00. Let's see. So back to the memo. So the next thing we looked at was bicycle facilities. And just through our inventory and our analysis, there's quite a few collectors and arterials that we highlighted that had some significant gaps for bicycles. You can see the big long list here. I think it's easier to find them on this map. So this shows where there's existing bike lanes. That's the green lines. We have identified a couple places where the bike lanes are pretty narrow. That's this single lane, and I know it's hard to see on my screen, but there's like a little car icon. And no surprise, it's really the south side of the 26 couplet going through town. As you guys know, it's really narrow there, especially against the on-street parking. And then we're also showing trails, both paved and unpaved. And then all of the kind of dark red dashes are the gaps that we're focusing on as at least, primary gaps in the system. I know Kelly added 2 in his comments, and they're not on the map, Kelly, but it was what? No, I can't remember.
I think there was one of
Road
Sandy.
and Vista
San-
Loop.
I think Sandy Heights, Vista Loop. There might have been another one too.
Okay. Yeah, so we'll add Vista Loop.
There's Sandy Heights, the portion I think from where it says DeBarco Road and Road 2, whatever there.
Oh, over here.
I think there's, I mean, that's a collector, and I don't think there's north of that. I don't think there's a bike lane there.
Okay.
Kelly, did we get the master plan for parks and trails, all that incorporated into here, or I haven't had a chance to look to see if all that was incorporated.
I'll let Rhea answer that, but yeah, we did have a meeting actually between ESA, our Parks and Master Plan consultant, and DKS. So I think they've coordinated and file shared.
Okay.
Yeah, so we have all of those. I believe we showed the trails with the pedestrian chapter or the pedestrian section that's coming up. Yeah.
Okay.
But yeah, we have all of that, and we're going to make sure that all of the projects out of that do get into the TSP. I will say a lot of those projects weren't prioritized though, like in the same way we would do in a TSP, like a low, medium, high. So that's something we may have to work in a little bit to see how those trail projects fold into the other TSP projects.
Yeah, and I think just to be fair to the people that worked on the Parks Master Plan, I think there's some reasoning behind that. And one of the primary reasons is because when the trails fall outside of the existing right-of-way, it's very hard to determine when the city will acquire an easement or a tract for a trail. And a lot of it depends on when that property gets developed. That's the opportunity to acquire that. So I think prioritizing them would be very difficult.
I agree. If you don't have a crystal ball of the order of how property you'd be guessing. So it's kind of a meaningless exercise.
That's my take from why that wasn't done, but maybe I'm wrong.
Okay.
One thing I did want to ask, since Seth is on the line, and it might be a question that other people have, is has there been any updates from ODOT on their idea or proposal to restripe and put bike lanes west of Bluff Road going out? I know that was discussed a couple of years back, and I haven't really heard anything more on that.
I haven't heard anything lately either, but I'll follow up with Maria and Basil and see if there's been any movement on that.
Kelly, I was wondering if the piece of highway from basically University to Reuben, a piece we just talked about that doesn't have any kind of trail, would be one of the reasons why we didn't put a bike trail in there, because you would have to go through that and it would create more conflicts with the narrowness. I just wonder if that's been the reason why it's stalled.
Yeah, potentially. Yeah, well, I wonder that. I think that would actually show up on the pedestrian map, not the bicycle map, but I could be wrong.
Okay.
I think that was on the ped map, because I think the trail would be too narrow to be technically a bike
Right.
facility.
Yeah. My mind tells me that that's what we kind of stopped pushing it because of that narrowness in that short chunk. It's hard to direct people to a conflict area or a dangerous area. So we didn't do it at all. I think that's what my mind tells me. It's been a while.
Yeah, I'd have to look into that more.
Okay, and we can see when we get to the pedestrian part of the memo, if it gets picked up there. And speaking of, okay, so I'm going to move on to pedestrian needs. We looked at crosswalks. We did review both the Cedar Ridge Middle School and Sandy Grade School Safe Route to School plans, and they had some great crossing projects, very specific, that were available to us. So we just picked those up and incorporated them into our plan. And then also the Transit Master Plan had quite a few crossing improvements downtown by the transit center. So we wanted to make sure we incorporated those too.
School district didn't provide any financing for those, did they?
No, not that I'm aware of. just projects, just need. But we'll do what we can. All right, hold on. I'll stop sharing for a second so we can all talk. Karen, raise your hand. Oh, you're muted.
I did want to follow up on that comment about funding for the Safe Routes to Schools projects, and previous conversations about grant funds. I just want folks to know that the state does have an infrastructure program, a grant program for specifically for Safe Routes to School infrastructure projects. And that one is a good source to look at if you do have Safe Routes to Schools plans and getting those projects funded. So that might be one to kind of keep high on the list of looking for ways to get things funded. We've been fairly successful at the county using that source.
So Karen, can I ask, when I've looked at it before for agencies, I always feel like the evaluation criteria are kind of tough. Are there certain evaluation criteria that are maybe working for you guys? Because I know it's demographics and you need like accidents and that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think that my recollection is that they do need to be on the kind of higher volume roads and whatnot. And then you do, if my recollection is correct, it does have to do with kind of the attendance at what is that called? The lunch program, the free and reduced lunch program, and a certain number of kids participating. So perhaps in Clackamas County, we have a wider variety of schools. But I guess I did want to make that note because in the past that those infrastructure funds hadn't been funded, and they are now.
Yeah, just to give some clarity on that, we did apply for a Safe Routes to School grant last year, and out of the 90 applicants that applied, I think they awarded 40, and we finished like 42nd or 43rd. They told me on the scoring, and the main reason is what you just highlighted is our proportion of kids that had the free and reduced lunch weren't as high as some other communities. We also didn't have enough traffic pedestrian accidents, which is kind of silly to me because that's what we're trying to prevent by making the improvements. But I know it's one of their scoring criteria, and we didn't score high enough on that. However, they have encouraged us to apply again because they think we'll be awarded next time, they said.
Yeah, and Kelly, I would guess that the funding's just going to go up and up and up. So, if 40 made it last time, maybe like 60 or 70, make it next time. I just keep hearing that the state has more and more funding for those type of projects. So that's good. All right. I'll go back to my window. So we also looked at the transit master plan. And then just from our inventory, we highlighted some other locations where we thought some crossings at some major intersections could be looked at. We looked at Bluff, Sandy Heights, Tabarco 211, from Tabarco 26, and then 211 at Sandy Heights Street. So we'll take a little deeper dive into those and see, exactly what type of pedestrian volumes and in-vehicle conditions are at that locations, and if having a marked crosswalk or something higher. Carl, like you had asked about the flashing beacons and having that protected crossing for pedestrian is a good candidate at those locations or other locations. And then Kelly, we also will be looking into the downtown walkability assessment as well. I know we're just starting to peek at that, but there'll be some crossing improvements that come out of that as well. And then we did an inventory of all the sidewalks, and then we marked where gaps in the sidewalks could be. And again, these are all the red dashed lines. These are the primary locations where sidewalks are missing, either on arterial collectors, and you can see there's quite a few. And then the little red plus sign are all of the intersections where we know there's a need for a marked crossing, and potentially with some sort of enhancement like flashing beacons or some other protection for them. That's to be determined. We'll have to dig in a little more to see exactly what the project would include. Any other questions for pedestrians or any questions on the map?
was gonna note the one at Sandy Heights and Highway 211, I think would have to be an overpass. So
Mm,
it would have to be a bridge or something because the grade differential. I just want to note that.
yeah, okay. All right, hold on. I can't see who raised their hand, but someone raise their hand. Go ahead.
Yeah, this is Seth.
Okay, Lisa.
I got an email from Maria saying that the that bike lane striping project has stalled, but they're definitely they want to know if the city's still interested. There's some more outreach work that needs to be done and some discussions about parking and things like that, but it hasn't totally gone away. So we can keep talking about that. And then in terms of the crossings on the highway, as you go through the additional recommendations, we can compare those locations to the spacing recommendations from the blueprint for urban design, and see if those match up, and that would give them a better chance of being approved by ODOT on US 26.
Okay, yeah, no, that's a great comment, Seth. We haven't dug into the blueprint for urban design yet, but with the downtown context, I would guess it would be the shortest spacing.
Mm-hmm.
Off the top of my head is like, 500 feet. So almost every block would be a
Yeah.
candidate.
Well, in the couplet, I feel like there's fairly decent crossings, but as you move out
here.
east and west, then yeah, it gets more challenging. But anyway.
Oh, if we needed some mid block.
Yeah, because I know that there's some long distances between signals, and the speeds are probably a little bit high, but I don't know if there were any recommendations that came out of those other studies.
Not that I saw. Yeah, and as you know, as you leave the couplet, it does become tough, because if we run a crossing analysis and looked at the volume, the traffic volumes and the speeds and the crossing distance, those might all be so high that marking, a mid-block crossing, at least without like full pedestrian signal protection, may actually be undesirable.
Mm-hmm.
I know there's the one, there's one just west of Bluff towards University that I know it's marked. I like the pizza place.
Are you talking about the University one? Because
there's one there right at University, but I think that's the only one I can think of. The rest are all just at the signals.
Yeah, that's not marked. There's just a pedestrian
Yeah, no, it should
refuge. Yeah.
That one should be marked, yeah.
I do have some concern. In fact, this came up a little bit at the last city council meeting. Safety issues during the evenings and nights, especially in the wintertime. A lot of our Highway 26 is pretty dark, and you got people riding bikes or walking along those edges. Is there a way of including some illumination on some of these things as a part of the plan here?
Yeah, lighting usually comes down to a safety improvement,
It
right?
does.
So it's kind of since it serves all modes, it's kind of under the umbrella of safety. But we could definitely highlight some locations or segments where we think lighting should be a project for sure.
A lot of the lighting issues for being needed was either on the Pioneer side of the couplet, and then also to the west end of town. Well,
Okay.
I guess really east of town too. There's a piece between the last light there on Ten Eyck out to DeBarco, or not DeBarco, maybe even beyond DeBarco place.
Yeah, I would guess it's pretty dark out there, especially like towards the apartments where you do see people walking.
Yeah. The low income housing out there on Vista Loop West is a real big issue for us. We are including a sidewalk plan to be installed here this next year, right, Mike? Or next year for that.
Yeah, we should update. We'll make some comments on that PED gap thing, because that project's funded. The contract's been awarded. It's going to happen.
Okay.
We can send you some GIS coverage, Rhea, with where the streetlights are.
Oh, sure. Yeah. If you guys have a streetlight shapefile, that would be great. We could look at the gaps, maybe just highlight some
Does the new sidewalk project out to Vista Loop, does that include enhanced lighting?
It was
No,
not
that had
financed.
to be dropped.
Yeah, it's supposed to be dropped. We were going to try to make a request with ODOT, but it doesn't look like they've got any money in to be able to add to the project. And so it looks like we're not going to have any. We had talked about doing some things off of the power poles and that kind of stuff, but sometimes there's a lot of distance between power poles.
So to be clear, is the sidewalks going to be what, north side and then from Tenike all the way out to Vista Loop West? Is that the project?
Correct.
Yep.
Okay. And is all the right of way there for that, or is there right of way needs as well?
Yeah, the right of way is clear. Yeah, it's all, I mean, they opened bids in October and I think they've awarded the contract.
Okay. Oh yeah. So yeah, we'll just show it as, we'll probably just show it as existing really. If it,
It's illumination, it's the lighting.
oh yeah, sure. I meant
Right at this point, because it is funded like Mike does for the sidewalk.
okay.
It's not the lighting.
We'll add that. So any other comments on pedestrian stuff? Maybe even off the highway? Like, are we missing any gaps or places you guys know of? People walk and do you think there's a need for additional protected crossings off the highway anywhere? Or is everything else pretty low volume?
Yeah, I think I'd mentioned this before in both this and the Parks Master Plan, and I think we were actually going to include it as a potential project in our Safe Routes to School program as well. But the crossing right now on Bluff Road for the middle school and high school students to get over to the ball fields, in my opinion, is not adequate. All it is right now is a crosswalk, but there's no push button activation or any sensors. So when you're driving through there, if it's at nighttime or if it's raining really hard, it's really hard to know if someone's about to cross there. And it's all students pretty much.
So like up,
Yeah, right there. That's exactly right.
yeah.
So that's like a crosswalk right now, but I think it needs to be enhanced with one of those hawk crossings or whatever you call it.
Excellent.
Okay.
Thanks, Kelly. That's a good point. Great point.
A flash beacon. And then also just so it's mainly students, but the other thing I will mention too is if you go to a football game or some high attended sports game there are a lot of other little small kids and parents and stuff crossing at that intersection too, because they park at the middle school. So I think it does need I think it needs an enhancement. I think it needs to be highly prioritized.
Agreed.
Yeah, the only ones I can think of are maybe at Bornstead and CV Drive. And then at 211, now that it's a city facility, and Arletha, our village, now that there's some housing being constructed on the north side of 211 there. But I'll send you a comment on that.
And then the only other one I was going to throw out there is Reuben Lane and DeBarco. I think we need a crosswalk and an enhancement there because we have 140 apartment units going in there right now. And it's already pretty heavily traveled for pedestrians going from Safeway in that area down to Tickle Creek Trail. So I live pretty close to there and I see a lot of people crossing there. So I think that should be kind of analyzed as a potential enhancement.
Yeah, we get a lot of comments about getting from that neighborhood that's west of 362nd to DeBarco or to the Tickle Creek Trail, but it's a terrible place to cross. But yeah, we can mark this up and send some narrative descriptions.
Sorry. Okay. Yeah, that would be helpful. I can't mark it all up now, but okay, all good comments. Thanks. And then some other things that we are looking at that there might be a need for pedestrians is, this kind of goes with the enhanced crossings of pedestrian refuge islands. A lot of times if there is a center median on a 3 or 5 lane road, where this 2-way left turn lane is, installing a pedestrian refuge island can be very helpful so they can make a phased crossing and have a safe place to wait in the middle. So we'll be looking at that and see if there's any locations that go with crossings. Also looking at a leading pedestrian interval. So that is where before you let the vehicles go, you let the pedestrian, the green guy that tells you that the pedestrians can cross, they get a 3 or 4 second head start, so they can get off the curb and into the crosswalk first. And then the cars on the side streets would get their green. So if they need to cross over, they're either turning left or right and they need to cross over that crosswalk, those pedestrians are already out, invisible. And it's shown that can really help with those turning vehicles when they're crossing the crosswalk area. And then also just looking at if any of the pedestrian signals need to be accessible. We can go through that and make sure that all of your signals are up to date with the ADA needs and identify those.
Rhea, I had a question on the leading pedestrian interval.
Mhm.
The green time isn't reduced for vehicles. Or is it?
It is.
Okay.
Yeah, to be clear, we have this, like if it's, a 60-second cycle, it's got to come from somewhere. So either it comes from the side street or the major street, we'd have to decide. But yeah, you have to adjust the signal timing and take those couple seconds out. But at most intersections, it's pretty nominal, right? Losing maybe up to 4 seconds for the pedestrians. And we've done a lot of, before and after analysis with ODOT and other jurisdictions just to see what that impact is. And it ends up usually just being a couple seconds of delay more, on average over the hour. And it's been more than worth it for the pedestrian safety benefit that you get out of it.
What's the rationale there? Is it like near a rest home, or it's
No, just anywhere where we have, high enough pedestrian volumes, and we think, and a lot of turn movements for vehicles. So, like Reuben could be an example where maybe pedestrians are taking a step off the curb the exact time, the light turns green, and then that person makes a right turn, and they kind of, the person turns right and doesn't really see them maybe right before they step off into the sidewalk. So yeah, really almost any intersection with a high enough pedestrian volume and turn movements with the vehicles where there'd be a lot of conflicts can benefit from it. But schools for sure, right? Because kids are vulnerable and don't always pay attention. That's probably a big one too. But yeah, most intersections would benefit from it if they can afford to lose the green time.
Yeah, that's the problem. We're getting troubles now with people complaining that the side streets off 26 are too short. So I assume we're going to talk about this once we start thinking about implementing them.
Yeah, and that kind of goes back to our adaptive signal system that we talked about too. That can be really beneficial. If the signal timing on 26 is set, for a certain level of demand on the highway, and say that fluctuates and the side streets for whatever reason are higher than needed, it could start taking time away from 26 and giving it to the side streets to kind of balance those delays, within certain parameters, because we do always want to make sure the highway is flowing at a certain rate. But if there's any extra capacity to give it to the side streets, the adaptive signal would know that and could do that.
The current issue is not that they're flowing. I think that they flow good through town on 26. That's the problem.
Well, sure. And I not to speak for ODOT, Seth, but the highway usually comes first when it comes to signals on the highway, within reason.
Maybe. Depends on what your viewpoint is. But I won't get to that at this point.
Sure. All right. And then let's jump to transit needs. And I will admit, Andy, most of this was copied from the transit master plan just for easeability and being consistent. But we did grab quite a few needs that made sense, kind of the high level stuff, improving local service, making sure you're managing flexible service capacity, improvements to regional service, and improvements to your dispatch technology. Those all somewhat affect transportation. And then more for the TSP, there were some pretty detailed projects and recommendations about stop improvements at certain locations, pedestrian improvements, which we had mentioned before, and then just better connectivity in some locations. And then back to equipment and technology. But the stop improvements, pedestrian improvements, and connectivity are really the ones where I want to make sure we're coordinated, because as we had mentioned before, I mean, those are just multimodal projects. They help everybody. So we want to make sure those get highlighted.
Yeah, so I sent you guys some updates to the wording of some of these.
I would apologize. I don't think I got your comments in before we posted this for you guys, but I do have them.
Okay, great.
I
So
do.
I won't go back over those then. But there is one thing that after I sent those comments that I thought we might want to also think about, but I'm not sure, is in the vision around the mountain plan, it is mentioned or identified as Sandy possibly putting a park and ride here in town, either increasing the parking ride out of the operations center or after my conversations with Jordan Wheeler, possibly creating a park and ride on Highway 26. So I'm not sure how we would incorporate that in here because the location isn't exactly identified, but it is something that's in the vision around the mountain plan.
Well, it's definitely something we could, show as a concept. It could be location agnostic. We don't have to say. I guess I would ask if it's something that you think that having it in the TSP would help as far as getting it like funded or prioritized.
Yeah, that's a good question. And with it already being in that plan, I'm not sure the answer to that. It might help in some sources, but it is identified in one plan already.
Okay. Well, yeah, I guess my fear is just, the TSP gets adopted and then if it changes, the document piece is one thing. And if it is, that is mostly a transit project. It definitely has motor vehicle benefits for sure. I would say put it on the west side so people stop driving through town. I'd rather have them park and get on a bus before they drive through Sandy than after they drive through Sandy. But I know you got to find the property and get it to work. But
yeah, no, I agree. And I'd rather have it out there than here at the operations center personally for a variety of reasons. And obviously it's just better not to pull off the highway and find somewhere than to be on the highway. And that's part of the reason I didn't follow up after I sent it is I'm not sure that it belongs in here, but I should mention it while we're in this meeting.
Okay. Well, like I said, we should, let's keep an eye on it or think about it. And if we think there's a reason to put it in, and I think funding would be the obvious reason. If we thought that having it in, you get bonus points for having it in 2 adopted plans or an adopted TSP or I don't know, anything like that we could add it. Or if we need to coordinate it with other projects, I don't know. Maybe.
So Andy, there's a great location there at Jarl. Several people are parking there now on the west side of the light. That's a great place. I would think it would be a nice spot to take a look at anyway. Also, a question would be as we grow down 211 and certainly east on 26, how are the transit stops being identified as we go on out those directions? And I suppose eventually north on Bluff and so on. Are we identifying those transit stops so we can keep on moving our way out that direction? And then also you're going to extend your transit times too, more gas, longer cycles.
That's a great point, Carl. I actually have not seen anything with stops necessarily identified. We do have some language in the transit master plan that, kind of gives measurements of when stops need to be improved. And so if you had a certain, ridership, 10 boardings a day, I think, then you want shelter and lighting, et cetera. And so we could just use that language to improve stops that are already existing. And we do coordinate, as you know, as with developments as they go in. Transit is given the opportunity to request amenities during that process. So, but we definitely have a pretty a need for some improved stops along our highways, no doubt about it.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
No, I believe also that is identified in the transit master plan. So we could benefit from just having a little blurb here in approved stop amenities that meet, performance measurements according to the transit master plan.
Okay. We can add that.
Thanks, Carl.
I mean, I think a transit facility would typically be regarded somewhat as a pedestrian facility as well. So I think there is some overlap with kind of the pedestrian plan to make sure that people can easily walk to the new transit center or the new park and ride, sorry.
Right.
At least that's been my experience in other counties and stuff I've lived in.
Yeah, it becomes a pedestrian destination in itself. Okay, I'm going to jump back to my memo here. We got 2 pages left. So the last section is on safety. And we really already hit a lot of these, but based on our analysis of historic safety data, there were 4 intersections that jumped out that may have a need for improvements. US 26 at 362nd, 26 at Reuben, 26 at Orient, and then 211 at DeBarco. And all of these, were ranked pretty high. I know both Orient. Hold on, I'm scanning really quick while I talk to you guys. No, it was Reuben that had the pedestrian issues. I think the other 2 were pretty much the rear end collisions that we had talked about before. And then 211 DeBarco was just turning collisions caused by drivers not yielding. So the improvements or the needs, again, we were recommending was putting in the adaptive control system. That could really help with a lot of these rear ends and has the benefit of delay reductions as well. But other than those, there are really no obvious safety countermeasures that we would be recommending at any of the locations based on kind of diving into the details.
Let me argue with that a little bit. I think
Sure.
that the Penike Highway 26 intersection going north, somewhat south, but mostly north with the turn into the 7-Eleven and now with the new community clinic going in on the other side of the road. There's a lot of stuff going on there with congestions, people making left-hand turns and then piling up because they can't make it through the queue on Penike. To me, that's got to be on our list of issues as we go along here. And I think it needs to be on our fix list.
So I could say that's great info because all we have is looking back, right? What kind of issues do we already have? But yeah, with that new driveway there, do you guys have any ideas on what you think the fix would be? I mean, do we need to limit access to those roads, make them right in, right out? I know one of them is a pretty new development.
The driveway approach onto Tenike at the new health clinic is being eliminated. There is a driveway approach to a convenience store at the northwest corner of the intersection that has a driveway approach that's like 30 feet from the intersection. That needs to go away, but it's hard to do without some sort of landing section on the site. I think another thing, I don't know if the intersection analysis you did identified the length of storage for northbound left turns from eastbound 26 to Tenike Road is often, at least during PM peak hour, spills out into the travel lane like routinely, and that's only going to get worse. There's a 10 unit or 8 unit townhouse development proposed there, or no, approved there. Kelly, that's been approved, hasn't it? Yeah, and then the health.
Yeah, it's. I mean, they're actively removing lumber from the site, and they're going to start grading it. So yeah.
So I don't know if your intersection analysis revealed that there was a problem with the length of the left turn storage there, but that does spill out into the travel lane in the PM hour.
Yeah, I mean, all of our intersection analysis, the model has the length of storage and then it reports if it spills back and how often. And we do look at the queuing because that can be a contributor, right, to rear ends and blocking traffic flow for that matter. But we haven't yet identified any specific improvements that would we be recommending because of those. And I would say this, we're getting a little bit in the weeds of where a 20-year TSP can go. But if there is a specific project, like, that's big enough that it would go in the TSP, extending a turn lane length, because we know it's a safety issue. And if it needs to be restriped, and then we can look at, does it fit in the right of way? I mean, some of the turn lanes are harder than others, right? With raised medians and things like that. But if it's just a little striping project, I guess I would look to you guys to tell me if it helps to have something like that in the TSP, and then where that lands with priorities.
Well, the fact that we don't know what the solution might be doesn't mean there's a problem there. That problem will only grow as we develop and as the clinic gets more busy and traffic increases on 26. I don't know what the solution would be, but there's certainly, I live fairly close there, and I see that congestion getting worse and worse as the years go by. And I just got to believe that all that development that we just discussed is going to create additional congestions and eventually increase our accidents. So I think we need to identify it anyway as an issue.
Yeah, and you're right. We don't have to know the exact solution. We can always have a project that just says US 26 at Tenike, look at access management strategies, you know what I mean, as needed. And maybe we just don't say what they are, and then that gives the city at least enough support that if they do need to go in and close some driveways or make them right in, right out, or maybe extend turn pockets. I mean, depending on how we word the improvement, you guys could do that. So we don't lose track of needing the solution, but we haven't 100% identified exactly what it is. And
is there a way of getting an analysis? Because I know that we don't have all the skills that we would need to make that happen unless we buy it somehow. I know we got a transportation analysis folks that do all that work for us, but do we need to establish that we need a analysis of that?
Well, we've looked at all the study intersections for sure, and we've flagged places where we know the queuing is going to be back further than can be supported with the existing storage. I guess it's just up to you guys if you want to have a TSP project to extend or restripe all of the storage for those. I don't know. Some cities.
Sorry to interrupt you. I think the TSP project could be additional. Reanalyze that intersection as just a one-off, just analyzing that intersection by itself outside the TSP process after the 10 to 15 houses go in and the health clinic is operational, because I think that will change the performance at that intersection potentially, and I think it should probably be reanalyzed after that. So I think the project would be reanalyze the intersection in the future once development occurs.
Kelly, do you think there'll be future developments where you could get them to do it? Like make that a study intersection and part of their scope? I don't know if you're expecting something else.
Potentially.
It's a pretty constrained piece of property. You got the real steep north that you can't do much with. And that little small development it's only a dozen houses or something like that there. So it's pretty small. But it really is the commercial business that's really causing all that interchange problems.
Yeah, well, as Kelly said, I mean, it is hard without a development application. It's hard to touch someone's driveway.
Yeah, we changed our standards for traffic impact analyses, and this development was below the threshold, so they didn't have to submit one. So they didn't look at that, how they were going to contribute to that left-hand turn storage. But we can rough something out and send it over. I think you can solve some of those driveway approach problems with a median on Tenike.
That's what I was going to say. Is there a width to put in just a skinny little median then?
Well, you could put in one of those little candlestick things.
At one time, we talked about a curve. At one time, we talked about a curve or an island down the center of Tenike to keep people from turning into 7-Eleven from the Highway 26. And so you could get in there only from going westbound or southbound instead of going in and coming, making that U-turn into 26. So there may be, that's a solution.
The other complicating factor is kind of like the county road. 26 is an ODOT facility, and the local streets are city facilities. So it would be a kind of an interagency cooperation thing there. I did have a question on the accident at like 362 and 26, and then I think Reuben and 26. Those Reuben and 26 still has a permissive or left, flashing yellow signal for left turns, and that seems to work pretty well. But the one at 362nd was eliminated because there were a lot of failure to yield accidents there. But I don't know if the data goes back far enough to show, when that was in place, and then it was pretty quickly removed because of, the uptick in accidents there.
Oh, yeah. I don't know if we'd be able to tell if it wasn't there very, very long. I mean, I am expecting the conditions at 362nd to change somehow, right? With that north leg being built. I think we're just going to have to see what that does to operations and what the ultimate signal timing ends up being at that intersection and what the queuing looks like. And if there's any safety impacts from that or not, we might just have to wait and see. I mean, I know as the signal timing goes in, we'll have safety in mind.
Yeah, I mean, we've just submitted for the grant of access on that. So, ODOT will analyze that or review that as part of that process.
Yeah.
So before we move on to the next thing, I do think Carl's point is really good, but I do think we need to wait to see the impacts from all the new development around that intersection, and then it probably needs to be reanalyzed.
Okay. Well, Kelly, we can definitely just say, as a TSP project, maybe have kind of an access management, right, turn lane, store safety review of the intersection, and kind of just wait and see. You're right. What happens, and then we don't lose sight of that issue.
I mean, I think it would be a good idea to somehow include that as a potential future study intersection, just as a standalone project.
Okay.
Yeah, we're not going to get anything any better. It's going to get worse.
Okay, sorry, I'm just taking notes while I'm talking to you guys. Okay, well, with that wraps up Tech Memo 5. Let me go back to the agenda. So the next thing that we were going to talk about today is we have an early, that's what I want to call it, an earlier draft Tech Memo 6, which is the regulatory solutions. So that's focused on the development code and policies. And we have Emma and Darcy on the phone today, or on the meeting from APG, and they're a sub-consultant on our team that are looking at that. So they put that early draft together just to show you kind of the direction that we're going. And Darcy, I don't know if you want to walk through it, or Kelly, if you even want to give a little bit of background. I know in previous meetings that we've had with Darcy and Emma, the city has a whole list of things that they are concerned about and issues that you have, and some things that we're going to look at. So I don't know, Kel, if you want to give maybe just a little bit of background to this group, and then let Darcy and Emma
I'll make mine really short. Basically, we need to reanalyze our entire code for clear and objective standards. So the whole code will be getting audited. But in the meantime, we're just looking at transportation and things that revolve around the TSP specific with this right now. And then the other thing we need to make sure is that everything is properly incorporated into the development code. And so that would include the transit master plan, the new TSP, the parks master plan, and any construction details or specifications that we would require developers to follow. So there's a lot of things that need to be readopted into the development code. So I don't know if you want to take it from there, Darcy.
Yeah, sure. Good afternoon, everybody. Rhea, do you have the document available?
For the show?
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind, if it's
No,
not
no.
I'm not going to walk through it because basically the bulk of it is, I think, about 15 pages of transportation planning rule notes. So those are really just to show our work. It's a requirement that the transportation planning rule, has the elements that are required to be included in a TSP, which is where Rhea and the DKS folks are making sure those things are all taken care of for Sandy. And you have an adopted, acknowledged TSP, so it's you're already good to go for a while, and now you're getting that update. What Emma and I were looking at really was the section of the transportation planning rule that relates to implementation, and how local jurisdictions can make sure that through future development, through future planning decisions, land use decisions, that you're actually implementing the system that you're planned for. So that was our exercise, and as Rhea said, it's an early draft. Kelly and Mike haven't had even a chance really to go through it, I don't think. Not only that, it's an incomplete draft because it only shows our analysis or our research related to the development code and consistency, or it's how well it implements the state requirements. We're also, of course, familiar with how your transportation system plan is shaping up through the memos that Rhea just went through, as well as having an early peek at Tech Memo number 7, which is your TSP solutions, which includes your street cross sections and roadway standards. So we're trying to kind of bring everything together, so that when you have a complete transportation system plan updated document, you'll also have a handful of suggested amendments to your development code. So I guess based on that, just to go over what's in the memo, like I said, that attachment is just basically transportation planning rule. This is what it requires. This is how the development code, the improvements with development requirements that Sandy already requires, your land division requirements. This is how it kind of all shapes up related to the TPR. And table 1 is just a summary of what we think are maybe some outstanding issues, some places where we feel like the code could be strengthened. And so that's what that is. The first couple of proposed amendments, really just kind of administrative revisions, kind of documenting really what Sandy's already doing in practice, no doubt. So no big deal there. The next few suggested modifications are in the improvements required with development chapter. And the first couple there, number 3 and 4, they're just suggestions related to bike, pedestrian, and transit requirements. So we talked a little bit about the Sandy Transit Master Plan and how that's being reflected in the TSP. What we want to see is really requirements related to future development, also implementing the transit master plan related to stops, for example, and make that connection stronger so that, if you are developing in the vicinity of or right next to a planned transit stop, that you as a developer know that you are going to be required to, provide for that, landing pad, that stop, etc. So as to the extent we can make that really strong, then the city has better leverage to get that improvement associated with the proposed development. Number 8, just skipping down to parking. We looked at the bicycle parking requirements, and again, we have an opportunity to require some bike parking at the transit center, at that future park and ride, and just an opportunity to kind of make that connection between the code and the transit master plan. Let's see, some street requirements, kind of, I wouldn't say additions, but we're going to take another look at the uh, impact study requirements. Again, I think Mike mentioned that those were changed, and so we want to look at those thresholds, see if those still make sense. Also, want to make sure that there's some language in there that just clarifies the city has, the authority to apply conditions um, related to the needed transit improvements. Um, Let's see. And then the other ones, really, the land division recommendations are about consistency. Kelly mentioned that. Want to make sure that your standards are reflected in your subdivision requirements. So your mobility standards, your level of service standards, your street cross section standards, just making sure that everything is updated just as it is in your TSP. And that's pretty much the extent of it. It's not a lot of changes. And most of them are just making sure that they're updated and consistent with the TSP. And where we can, we'll make or suggest improvements. I think based on your experience with the development code, where you've seen like, oh gosh, wish we could have asked for this, or we wish we could have, made this more clear. This might be an opportunity to kind of make those changes again related to the transportation system plan.
I figured if it was actually something we needed to.
Yeah, and so it's just one other thing to add on to that. So as part of that, one big thing you'll see in development codes, not in just Sandy, but all around the state of Oregon, will be that plans are not going to be generally referenced anymore. So you're not going to see many cities when they make code adoptions say consistent with, because that's not clear and objective. And you're also not going to see references to something like the transportation system plan. It would be as adopted per the 2022 transportation system plan. So that's some of the changes that you'll be seeing all around the state in development codes. I'm also hoping to adopt the fire code and the standards within the fire code directly into the subdivision criteria for turnaround and fire hydrant access and fire flow. So there'll be a lot more references to different codes and different master plans that have been adopted both locally and at the state level.
Right. And that also reminds me, so this is just a table of proposed, recommended updates. Hasn't been vetted yet with the city. So Kelly's going to take a deep dive into those recommendations, make sure that we've got everything that you would all like to see improved in the development code. So we'll take a shot there. And then our next step, once we get that kind of sorted with city staff, is to actually provide that language. So it's a little bit difficult to look at, a proposed amendment without getting back to the code and looking at where that language is. And, oh, right, that's what she's talking about. But we will provide the city with adoption ready language. So you'll have the section that's being proposed to be amended, as well as the actual text amendments. So you can see what's being eliminated with strikeout language, and you'll see what's being proposed to be added with underlined language. So some things that might not be very clear at the moment will be super clear when we provide that proposed language. And again, that will go through a review with staff and potentially and your attorney make sure that everything is consistent, internally consistent, as well as won't get the city in any trouble. But that's to come.
Yeah, and just to clarify, all municipal code changes are now vetted by the city attorney's office. So yes, you're correct, Darcy.
Excellent, good. Us at HPG, we're the first to admit we are not land use attorneys. So we know an awful lot about codes, but yes, very good to get it all checked out.
So Kelly, I'll jump in here real quick. There was a little bit of a conversation between myself and one of the city council, the one that's on the fire department, for a matter of interest, who said looked like there was some conflict between what some of our road requirements were and what ODOT was installing in terms of their ADA requirements, turning vehicles, that kind of stuff. I don't want to get into those kind of weeds, but are we coordinating with some of like the ODOT standards and guides and whatever else that needs to be connected with our own code, so we don't end up losing? I'm not sure what else would be. Maybe county, Mike talked about 10IC having some county interactions that are needed. Have we made all those kind of interactions happening?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that's a question more for Mike than myself. So you're basically saying, are we making sure that the development code and the TSP are reflecting the standards of the county and ODOT?
Right, yeah. And the biggest example I can think of is that on some of these ADA improvements that they've been doing on the couplet, the fire department's finding it difficult to make some of those turns with some of the car parking status on some of our side roads. And so I'm just wondering if we're making sure that we don't get into conflict with one code versus another, just making sure we coordinate those things.
Well, yeah, there's a specific exemption, I think. I don't know if it's in the TPR, but in with DLCD about, that local street standards trump fire department or emergency service provider roadway widths, and that's, I can't remember what the OAR is, but it's even in the Clackamas County Interagency Fire Code access guidelines, that they don't supersede local jurisdictions' street design standards.
Okay. Well, I'm just thinking that if one code makes it difficult, or maybe even the worst case, impossible for certain activities and transportation issues to coordinate, that maybe we need to make sure we change our code or make sure that the codes complement each other.
I think one thing that you will see is, and Mike knows way more about this than I do, but I think the new ODOT standards for ADA crossing or the intersection design is different than what we have adopted locally here. So there's on the ODOT, and this is a lot of what they're correcting, is if you're at an intersection, they have the truncated domes, the little yellow sheeted things, and the slopes. So they have one going towards each intersection. And you'll see on a lot of local streets, we just have one that's at the curb line, and it kind of shoots people into the intersection instead of across. So that's one inconsistency that I think if we want to desire it to be the same as the ODOT standard, we would have to specify that in like our construction details and adopt that into the development code by reference.
Yeah, my point is I think we don't end up being in conflict with each other, and so we end up fighting back and forth about which entity is doing what to put the other entity into conflict is also.
Yeah, I mean, on something like that, I would think, I don't know if the fire district commented on the construction plans for those ramps, but going forward, that might be a good thing to include them if there's big projects like that, to get feedback from them at least.
Yeah. Okay.
Gary, did you guys comment on those ADA ramps? I'm not too sure if you're involved in that or not. I think he's muted.
It probably doesn't make a difference this moment, Kelly. The point was I want to make sure we coordinate. We don't end up with conflicts that create problems with either side.
What was the last question, Kelly?
I was just wondering on all the new ODOT, the ODOT ADA ramps that they're installing all over the state of Oregon, if they've been reaching out to local fire jurisdictions or districts to get feedback on those.
They have not to me. I know our fire chief had a concern on the ramp and the little build out they were doing coming out of the fire station and turning out onto Proctor, but I'm not sure who he talked to or if somebody reached out to him or if he even talked to anybody, but it was resolved somehow so we could still make that turn.
Yeah, the reason why I brought it up was just because I knew there was at least one example But there may be lots of others or very few others. I don't know.
So if it goes through a land use process, then everything gets mailed out to all the agencies. If it's not through a land use process, I think it's just not as clear for staff when to involve other agencies because there's not, it's not by the book essentially. So I think that's an internal policy thing we might need to look at more.
Yeah, and in general, with design, at least on the highway, I don't think we had the blueprint for urban design when we scoped this project. And I don't think we're scoped to really do an extensive reevaluation of design standards, but that might be a future project as well to really dig into that, at least on the highway.
Has anyone seen if any local jurisdictions are adopting different ADA curb ramps to be consistent with the new ones that ODOT's putting in or in the state of Oregon?
Yeah, I don't know. Usually we don't get into that level of detail on the TSPs that I know of.
Yeah, but even in design review, Kelly, I haven't seen that pop up.
And the reason why I bring it up is because didn't ODOT lose like a lawsuit, and so that's why they're going in. So I'm just trying to get ahead of it. Like, is the next thing going to be the local jurisdictions lose lawsuit, and then all the local jurisdictions are going to have to put in new ADA ramps everywhere? So should we just be designing them to be consistent with the ODOT standard anyways, since that's what we know has been approved by, a court or whoever approved that?
Well, it's not an ODOT standard. It's in the ADA. It's called the Public Right-of-Way Access Guidelines. That's what you have to meet. Different agencies sometimes go beyond that, and that's what ODOT has done as part of this settlement. But you just have to meet it. You don't have to exceed it.
Mike, do your current standards meet it, or do you know?
Yeah, we use the ProAg, and we default to the ODOT standard details just because it's easier. But as far as like dual ramps at every intersection, we only require dual ramps at intersections of locals and collectors and arterials. Local and local intersections can still have a single ramp, and that meets the ProAg standard, so we're okay there.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, the ODOT issue is they're all arterials.
Right, exactly, yeah.
So they have a higher thing, yeah. Oh, thanks, Karen. Yeah, I know we're butting up against time. But you might be fine then, Kelly. I mean, if you meet that standard, yeah, ODOT's just vulnerable because all they have is arterials and they're not meeting it.
Yeah, I'm not saying I'm not saying we won't be fine. I'm just saying that things like that, I think we should kind of think about just to see if anybody knows any of that's coming down the line. To say like that maybe the ProAg is going to change in the future. I just don't know the answer to any of that stuff. I don't follow it.
Be glad that you don't have to.
Yeah, the cities that I work with, I'm trying to think, there's really no theme of updates that they're making to get ahead of things that I'm aware of. They're mostly just fixing archaic 20-year-old things they've never fixed. Darcy knows, but no, I don't know anyone getting ahead of things.
I would be happy if we got up to par with those old things taken care of.
You guys are ahead of a lot of cities. Okay, well, with that, we have 2 minutes left, so I'm just gonna jump back. We just have, hold on, go back to the agenda. So we're all the way to the end, yeah. So for next steps, I just wanted this group to be aware that we have a joint Planning Commission City Council work session that's scheduled for December 13th. So we'll be catching those two groups up with where we are right now and starting to talk to them about getting their input on some of the direction that we'll be going with our projects and our priorities. And then for this group, the CAC meeting number 4 would likely be planned sometimes after that, as soon as we get some input from them. And I didn't add it to the agenda, but I'm just realizing now I should have. We will also be working on the next tech memo number 7, which is the draft solutions. And we already have a draft to the PMT to look at. But that's where we finally get to the meat of the TSP. There's all the projects, all the cost estimates, and then the early ranking of high, medium, and low priorities based on the goals and evaluation criteria that we developed at the beginning. And then also comparing that to that $10 million that I talked about that we have to spend, and just seeing what's a high first agreeing on what's a higher priority, and then agreeing on what we think is reasonable to fund. And then we would also have more finalized stuff from APG, from Darcy and Emma, on the proposed code amendments and things like that. So that's really the next step. And then once we work through that, we can start working like on a draft TSP and really starting to get towards the end of where this is going. I will say, and Kelly, you can add, but we're just going to come right out at the joint work session and talk about the bypass to get it out in the open and answer all those questions and have that full conversation so everybody feels good. And then we can start talking about the TSP, because I know if we try to do it in the other order, it'll just keep going back to the bypass. So we're just going to front load the conversation with that and make sure everybody gets all their questions answered first.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think that's the correct way of doing it.
Yeah, that's fine. And I'm happy to talk. Yeah. Happy to talk about the bypass. I know there's a million questions, but at the end, for this group, it's really, we have to decide, does it stay in the TSP as a project or not? I mean, that's really our decision. It's not going to be on the financially constrained list because we have $10 million. We don't have $1 billion. So that's really answers itself. But if everybody's, supports it and in the community and the decision makers, then it stays in the TSP as an unfunded project, and we can talk about next steps for it. So. All right, Darcy, raise your hand. Darcy, you don't have to raise your hand.
I know. I wanted to make sure I knew how to do it. So the work session on the 13th, and who's sending out that invite, and is it in the evening, and is it in person?
It's going to be a hybrid. So there'll be options to be in person or be doing it virtually. And it'll be sent by Jeff Aprati, who's on this call. He's the city recorder.
Great.
Yeah, we'll be sending that out soon.
And it'll be at 6 p.m.
Awesome. Okay.
And with that, it's 3:02. Sorry, we're 2 minutes over.
Yeah, one final thing with the that bike lane project that Kelly asked about, I posted in the chat that Maria was emphasizing that if the city does still want those buffered bike lanes, let's make sure that's a project in the TSP, so that'll help support it moving forward.
Okay.
I mean, I think it would be good to add it as this is just my feelings on it. I think it would be good to add it as a project, and that could be a discussion point on the 13th of December potentially.
Okay.
To get council direction on whether they want to move forward with that.
It's an old council priority. It wasn't real high, but I know we talked about it several years back. So let's kick it around some more. See if the new council is all up in favor of it.
Was there, Seth, just real quickly on that, was there a funding mechanism that ODOT had identified?
Yeah, I believe there's some bike ped funds. I don't know the details right now, but I think that's definitely a possibility. But there was just, like I mentioned earlier, some trying to figure out parking and exactly how to the interaction with transit. Some different details need to be worked out.
And the reason why I asked that is because it might be helpful on the 13th if we're going to discuss that, to have that, at least some more information on that, because with the amount of projects we have locally and the limited funding, my guess is that's probably not going to be behind the list. But if ODOT's paying for it, or the majority of it, then maybe there will be interest.
Yeah, I'll try to find out more.
I think that would be safe if it's funded by ODOT and ODOT takes the lead on eliminating the on-street parking. City's 100% in favor of it.
I would be very much in favor of upping the priority if ODOT paid for it. Almost guaranteed.
All right, I'll follow up on that one.
Okay, with that, any other comments, questions?
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thanks everyone. It's a great discussion. All right. Have a good day.
You too.
Have a good
All
week.
right.
Thank you.